Coach back at you. And so let's go ahead and get this thing going on. I am setting up. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to spend that with me on this topic that we have here. So let's definitely get this going. Hold on, I'm just setting up to get more people in here. Thank you all for your patience. Um, and this live is a precursor to what I'm going to be doing later on tonight at 7. Let's get that started. And last but not least, so be sure that you're following my profile for that so that you're aware and that you're catching up. If you're not getting that, be sure there should be a way for you to turn on notifications. You can also send me a note as well in regards to what I may have coming up for you so that you are completely in the know. Oh, all right. I'm just doing this here. Okay, so that's good. And also, let's make that better. Wonderful. Okay. All right, everyone. Glad that we're all here. Let me make sure that I am seeing people. Let me turn this down here. All right. Let's definitely get this going. Wonderful. Okay. That's great. I'm glad that that's going. And let me be sure that I have all the meters. As I said, this tonight, this live today is really a precursor as to what's going on tonight. Tonight, um, in less than 2 hours, I'm going to be doing a mastermind session. It's called Executive Blind Spots. Now, you don't have to be an executive to attend. This is just the framework that I'm using. So I just want to be sure and clarify that. Make sure that I'm on point and accrediting and making sure that everyone is aware that you can come. So this really is the precursor for that. This is the step before. This is kind of almost like you almost want to see this as the trailer. And so, but this is more an extended trailer, but trust me, you'll still get something out of this. So let's make sure we have that. And one more thing. And I have my water as well. Thank you all so much for those that were asking. Yep. Let's make sure we're muted out. Okay. So we're good to go. One more thing I've got to do. Today definitely was a day. Oh my gosh. Today was a day. So let's make sure there we go. Excellent, excellent. And so as you're here, be sure if you can share out the live. So for those that you may see that could benefit from this topic, or may be aware you think would have the time to come through, I would say definitely take the time, share this out, invite them, let them know that I am going live now, and also that they're able to attend the mastermind tonight. It is free, so you just have to register. Once you register, then you'll be able to come in. That's it. There's no charge, no payment. It's just coming in, getting the information. That's what this is all about. Okay? So I just want to be sure that everyone here has an opportunity to attend and get this information. All right? So let's be sure that we're operating in that same mindset and we're all getting this information because really it's about pouring in value. All right. Hey, Stay True. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. And so, for those that are coming in, as I said, be sure to share it out. Giving the gifts for those that on that platform, a heartbeat would be great. Thank you so much, and thank you. I appreciate it. So, let me just get my notes, and we can go ahead and get started. And so, let's see here. it's good to be able to have this information. Oh, hit refresh when I wasn't supposed to. Okay, so here we go. Our topic today is the topic today is 8 signs that you may have a blind spot. Now, this is not to point fingers, but what I want to do is just at least give you some idea, to give you some awareness, some curiosity. Also, as I said, this is a step before the free session tonight. That's right. There is a free, my mastermind tonight is called Executive Blind Spot Audit. And so we'll be going over certain things along those lines, the scoring process, diagnostic patterns. But this right here is going to be talking about one of the biggest limitations that may be in your life that may not be something you're refusing to change. It might be something that you cannot yet see. All right. And so thank you all so much. And thank you for sharing out the live. I appreciate it. And bear with me. I'm just going to take this one drink and we're going to be on our way. Okay. So let's go ahead and get going. Oh, here's the question I have for you. Have any of you ever walked around for several hours with something on your shirt, something in your teeth, or even a tag that was hanging out of your clothes and no one told you? Now, just as a side note, I know I'm starting. I am that person in regards to if I see someone's tag out and I don't know you, hey Cody, if I don't know you, I will let you know, hey, your tag's out, um, something showing. Oh, by the way, part of your clothes is hanging out the car. So I'm that person that'll let you know, FYI. So if you're around me, that's one thing you will not have to worry about. But this is for you. Have you ever had that opportunity or had that time where you walked around for over half the day and there was a tag out, or there was a particular stain, and no one told you? Then when you finally looked in the mirror, you got to wherever you got to, either home or bathroom, and you just thought to yourself, like, how long has that been there? And then the real question becomes is how many people saw it? And that's the problem right there with blind spots. See, everybody else can see them, and you're often really the last person to know. And sometimes people, they don't tell you because they're trying to be polite, and so they don't tell you because they may be afraid of how you respond, which I can relate. So there's a way to approach that. And sometimes people don't tell you because they've already tried it once and they decided, hey, I'm going to stay in my lane, enjoy my peace, I'm good. Some people do not, some people don't even stop noticing your behavior. They simply just don't bring it up. Now that's a different problem. So a blind spot is not necessarily a character flaw. So we're not saying that this is part of your belief system. It's not saying that you're a bad person or that you're incompetent. It just means that there's something about your habits, about your communication, your mindset, um, something about your behavior that you can't see clearly from where you're standing. That's what that is. Hey Mo, thanks for joining the live. Hey, thanks for joining. Thank you so much. And so, hold on. Let me just move my notes here so I can see. Oh, bear with me, y'all. Okay. All right, now I can see. Thank you so much for liking the live. And so, every person, if you're a driver, you're the one. If you're a driver, you've understood that about what I mean by blind spots. Yes, peace, health, and love, blessings to you. It means that you can check your mirror, you can turn your head, you look over your shoulder, and somehow there could still be a car sitting in the exact spot that you can't see. This is why cars now have lights, they have alarms, cameras, sensors. Sometimes they got a voice that practically says, don't change lanes. There's an entire vehicle beside you. So some of us really need that kind of warning when it comes to our personal lives. We need a light to come on. We need an alarm to beep. We need someone to say, hey, before you make that move, there's something over there that you're not seeing. So, hey, LZ. And so we've all made good decisions before, and we've survived difficult seasons. Now, you've achieved some things and you know how to get results. You know what I mean? Um, you know how to get results. And so, hold on for a minute. Got it. Okay. Someone, there was just a comment there. Had to handle that. Okay. Here we go. All right. So now, when it comes to that, that can make it harder to admit that you may still be missing something because you've achieved certain things. You've achieved X, you've achieved Y, and Z, and that can make it harder. So, what we're going to talk about are basically 8 signs that you could still be missing something. And so, and this is not about beating yourself up. This is not about self condemnation. Please, this is not about that. Don't think that. This is about becoming more aware because you can't adjust what you refuse to examine. Right? So you want to be able to identify it and know that you can't grow past something you are determined to defend. So as we go through these 8 signs, don't immediately think about your family, your partner, your coworker, your boss, your manager, your employee, your pastor, or that one cousin who needs this entire life. This is not the time to tag them. This is the time to look out for yourself. Hey, Maria. And so the people who need this message the most are often the first ones sending it to somebody else. So stay with me. You may discover something that's important. So let's go through the points. Point number 1, you keep experiencing the same frustration. So one thing to note is that sometimes when the scenery changes but the problem stays the same, it may be time to examine the traveler. And so, hey, Els, hey, BR. What I mean by that is this. So there's a time when you have a repeated action that's happening. And so when that repeated frustration is maybe more than just what some people term as bad luck. It really is potentially looking at an evidence of a pattern you're not recognizing. So one of the clearest signs of a blind spot is repetition. If you keep running into the same kind of problem, that's the issue. That can become the issue there. And so now that you're aware of that and you're knowing, you're thinking, okay, what can I do? So think about this. People change, companies change, relationships change, opportunities and locations, all those things change. But somehow the frustration you feel looks strangely familiar. And so you leave one job because nobody listens to you. Then you go to another job and you feel that no one listens to you there either. See what I'm saying? You're going to these different areas, different places, and you're thinking you're leaving it. However, it's the same feeling that keeps following you. You leave one relationship because you feel misunderstood, but then you enter another relationship, and eventually you feel misunderstood again. So you do all these things. You're making these changes. You change teams. You change coaches. You change churches. You change business partners. You buy another notebook. At some point, that notebook that you buy, that journal, it's innocent. Because sometimes the common denominator is it's not the environment. It's us. It's us who's the environment. It's us who's the one that's doing it here. Now, this doesn't mean that everything is your fault. So I'm not saying everything here is your fault. It just means that you should be curious about what you may be contributing. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming in. And so you got to ask what role you consistently play in that pattern. You got to ask yourself, what have you never tried doing differently? And so we miss these blind spots. We miss these things because the names and the circumstances change, but the pattern remains. That's the thing. So a blind spot, it keeps you focused on the latest incident. But when you're more aware, that helps you recognize the larger cycle of what's going on. So what can we do? This. You want to stop treating every repeated problem like it's a brand new emergency. See, there may be one pattern creating several different symptoms. So you don't need to fix 12 unrelated items and problems and things. You just may need to recognize one repeated behavior. So so that's really it. you want to recognize that one behavior, because sometimes the funny thing is, I heard this written, or I read this, is that sometimes we keep changing the cast, but somehow the movie has the same plot. So you want to ask yourself, hey Shorty, thanks so much for coming in. You want to ask yourself, what frustration keeps repeating in your life? Have you experienced the same problem with different people? What's a pattern that keeps showing up in different forms? Now, if this relates, if you understand this, put a one in the chat. Put a one into the chat if you can relate to this, or if you've seen this happen to others. Okay. So when the same transition keeps returning, one response is to work harder, but that leads us to that second side. So point two, that you may have a blind spot, is that your effort is increasing, but your results are not. So see, there's more effort cannot doesn't always compensate for a pattern you haven't examined. So let's think about this. Many times you want to work harder, and you're thinking that's the answer. Well, let me stay up late. Let me stay up beyond midnight. Let me stay up beyond this time. However, your blind spot, it's really causing your effort to be misdirected. See, high performers are often excellent. They're the ones that are excellent at increasing effort. But when something doesn't work, they push harder. So what do? What's the challenge? They wake up earlier, you stay up later, you add another meeting, you create another spreadsheet, you download another app. And at some point, your phone has like 19 different apps helping you to avoid one important task. See, when you add effort to it, that effort that you're adding, it feels productive and it makes you feel responsible. You know, but the thing is, that effort, it really does, it can hide the fact that your approach is not working. See, you can be extremely committed, but you're committed to the wrong strategy. And you can be disciplined, but you're disciplined in a routine that's no longer effective. So so you become busy and you focus on that busyness. That busyness creates that illusion that you're making progress. So you look at your calendar and you're like, well, my calendar is full. Yeah, your calendar is full, but it doesn't automatically mean it's a productive life. If you feel like you're exhausted because you work so hard, it doesn't mean that it's always proof of effectiveness. Sometimes that exhaustion is proof that the system you have is broken and it needs to be replaced. So think about it. If the same amount of work keeps producing the same limited results, you got to pause. Hey, Messiah. Hey, Juan. Thanks for coming in. You've got to stop. Don't immediately add more to it. Examine your process. Find out where your time is going. What do you keep doing out of habit? What have you never questioned? So you got to ask whether your effort is connected to your actual priority. Ask whether you're doing the work that someone else should be doing. So you've got to ask these questions. You got to ask what it is you're avoiding and one action that could create movement. See, some people, they'll do 10 comfortable tasks to avoid one uncomfortable task. See, they'll do 10 comfortable tasks to avoid one uncomfortable task. They'll reorganize their desk. They answer old emails. They'll straighten the desk. They'll sharpen pencils, whatever. They'll say that I'm busy, but busy doing what? See, effort without direction, that actually becomes expensive. So you've got to have greater awareness. You need to know what deserves your effort. You also need to know what no longer deserves your effort. So the strongest people are not always the one doing the most. They're the ones who finally stopped doing what was not working. So it's one of those key things. It's like some of us are still putting like premium gas into a car with no tires, wondering why there's a rough ride. It's wild. So hey, Renee. So yes, and go ahead and ask your questions. If there's any questions that you have or anything you want me to touch upon to do a deeper dive in, let me know. And just a reminder, as I said, this is the precursor to tonight. So in less than 2 hours, we're going to be doing a mastermind, and that is free, no charge. You just have to register. And if you want the link, check the comments or send me a message with the word mastermind, and I will send you the link so you can register. All right. So let's continue on. Now ask yourself this: are you working harder than you were 6 months ago? Are the results improving at the same rate? If if it is, if you've ever finished a full day and still wondered what you actually accomplished, type the word busy in the chat. That's right, type the word busy in the chat. All right. So let's go to the third point. Third point of third sign that you may have a blind spot. Number three, you're surprised by feedback other people consider obvious. Hmm. Think about it. When feedback shocks you but doesn't surprise anyone else, that's when you want to pay attention. See, a blind spot, it becomes visible when someone finally says what others have already noticed. So ask yourself, have you ever received feedback that completely surprised you? Someone says you interrupt people. You're like, I don't interrupt people. You say that while interrupting them. Someone says you seem available, and you say, I'm always available. They mention the 9 messages you've never answered, or the text messages you haven't got back to, or the voicemails you haven't responded to. Someone may say that you can be intimidating, and you say, people know they can talk to me. Meanwhile, no one has spoken to you or spoken at all during your entire meeting, your entire interaction. See, feedback reveals a gap between your intention and your impact. That's key. There is that gap between intention and impact. So you may intend to be direct, but often people may experience your tone as dismissive. I've been there, done that. You may intend to be helpful, but a lot of times people will experience you as being controlling, like you have to have your hands in everything. So your intention matters. Your impact also matters. See, good intentions don't erase repeated effects. So a blind spot can be the difference between how you see yourself and how others really experience you. That's important. Hey, Ari. So that gap can become costly because it can damage trust, it can weaken communication, it can create confusion. It makes people stop contributing, and that's when you want to pay attention. So the first instinct when you think about that is often to reject that uncomfortable feedback that you're getting. You start building a defensiveness, and you present evidence, you explain your childhood, you call on, oops, excuse me. You're calling with, you're pulling up old text messages and saying, you know what, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean to say that. I meant to say, been there. See, meaning is important, but impact still needs that attention. So you don't have to accept every piece of feedback as absolute truth, because there's some feedback that's going to be inaccurate. But repeated feedback, now that deserves examination. That deserves a closer look. So when several unrelated people say similar things, do not ignore that pattern. That is a clear pattern right there. So you don't want to focus only on whether they said it perfectly. Ask whether there is something useful inside of what they said. That's really what's going to land with you. All right. Because feedback, it's some people think of it as an attack, but it's not always that. Sometimes feedback can be a mirror. It's a warning or an opportunity to make that adjustment before the cost gets larger. All right. Everyone good? Okay. So let's ask yourself this. Has anyone received any feedback that has surprised you in the past? Just put that in the chat. Put that in the chat. Put that in the comment. Okay. While you're putting that, many people are, if you're typing, let's keep going. So receiving feedback is one thing. What we do immediately after receiving it reveals even more. So the fourth sign that you may have a blind spot is that you explain your behavior faster than you examine it. We all know these people. We've seen that. We've seen that before. Whereas the faster you defend a pattern, the longer you may remain trapped inside of it. Because if you're in a state of constant explanation, that can become a shield that can prevent that honest, real, that honest, real life self-reflection that's needed. So when it comes to explanations, we don't want to see, I don't want to put it out there that explanations are always excuses. They're not. Because when it comes to explanation, it's about context, circumstances, it's about the history of it. All those things matter. But then you want to think about it. The explanation can also become a reflex. Someone points out a pattern, and before they finish the sentence, you already have your response. And one of the first things you may say is that I only did that because you don't fully understand the full situation. The time was different. I was tired. I was stressed. I had a lot going. All those things may be true. The question is whether the behavior still needs the examination. Hey, JD. Hey, J Lover. See, stress may explain your tone because the reason doesn't remove the consequence. That's the thing. It's not about you examining it. The reason doesn't remove what happens to it. It doesn't automatically repair the relationship. In the busyness, that may explain the missed deadline, but it does not complete the full assignment. See, there's an avoidance that's happening, and that fear may be the issue. What I mean by that is that when it comes to that feedback and your response, your story may be accurate. You may have been tired. You may have been doing only this, but the question is, the pattern though is still damaging what's being done about it. See, blind spots, they survive. They survive by rationalization. Like you keep reasoning. The reason I did this is because of this. If you have a reason for it, if you can explain it, it makes you feel comfortable. That way, and it basically allows you to keep seeing ourselves as the exception. Yes, I did that, but my situation is different. Everybody thinks their situation is different. That's why the pattern continues. See, self-awareness, when you start thinking about this, it begins when you delay the defense. You know what I mean? When you stop defending yourself, when you pause before explaining. See, what you can do is you can ask a question, ask for an example, ask when the behavior usually happens, and then you pause. Then you can ask, what is it that you can do differently? See, you don't lose power by becoming curious. You actually gain information. What happens is when you're curious, it lowers your defensiveness. See, being curious, really, it keeps the conversation open and it helps you learn. Because when it comes down to it, the goal is it's not to prove that you're wrong about everything. The goal is to become aware of what may be missing. That's the thing. It's about what may be missing. So in that blind spot, sometimes the strongest sentence you can say is, I had not seen that before. Or another one is, give me an example. Or let me think about that. Now, you don't have to respond instantly. You don't have to win every conversation. It's not about you defending every decision, but it's about that growth. And that growth begins when you stop trying to be right long enough to become better. That's the thing. Stop trying to be right long enough to become better. All right. So ask yourself this: do you become defensive when someone questions your behavior? Now, do you take the time to listen fully, or do you prepare your response? Are you already thinking, here I go, here I go? What would happen if you pause before explaining? So that's one of the signs. All right. So that's four. So far, we've covered 4 of the 8 signs you may have a blind spot. All right. Put any questions, put them into the chat. I will do my best to get to them to respond right now. Okay. All right. Let's continue on. Point number 5. Now, you may have stopped asking people. 8 signs you may have a blind spot is that you may have stopped asking people what they honestly see. See, if you can't receive honest feedback, if you only ask questions that invite comfortable answers. See, that's the challenge, is that when you're thinking about it, if there's a lack of honest feedback, it doesn't mean that everything is going well. It just may mean people no longer feel invited or open to speak to you. So many people will say that they want honest feedback. They'll say that they want the brutal truth. Be honest with me. Want to sit down and tell me, you can talk to me. It's okay. You'll hear this. It's okay. I don't bite. Hey, Dawn, thanks for joining. What people really want is when they say they want honest feedback, sometimes they'll say they want supportive agreement with suggestions. They ask, what do you think? And their face says, choose your next words carefully. I've been in meetings where people have had that. People can feel people can feel that. They feel when your question is not truly open. They know when you want confirmation, and they know when you want honesty. That's how people are. If you repeatedly punish honesty, people will eventually stop offering it. They'll stop. See, punishment does always look dramatic. It may look defensive. It may look like silence, sarcasm. It may be like bringing the feedback up 6 months later. So people learn what's safe around you. If they stop asking you to tell the truth, if they stop telling you the truth, ask why. Maybe they don't think you'll listen. That's it. Maybe they don't want the emotional labor of like managing a reaction. See, honest feedback really requires trust, and it also requires you being humble. That humility factor comes in. If you want that feedback, you've got to ask specific questions. So it's like, ask, what is one thing I do that makes communication harder? Ooh, that's powerful. That's powerful by itself. You know, you could ask this: if you're in a group environment, what do I do that slows the team down? Or where do you think I create uh, unnecessary pressure? See, those are different questions from everything's good, right? You know, so those are the brave questions, but you can't ask the brave questions if you only want comfortable answers. You know, and if when somebody answers you honestly when you ask them questions, you can't punish them. You can't give them the silence treatment or bring it up years later. Remember when you said no? You can't do that. You want to thank them. You take notes. You ask for an example. You reflect before responding because you may not agree with anything. And the goal is not to be in complete agreement or immediate agreement. The goal of you asking that question is to get greater visibility in yourself. You need people who care more about your growth than your comfort. That's important. You need people who are going to challenge you at the same time without disrespecting you. You know, it's better to hear the warning before you experience the actual damage. That's what's key. It's because if nobody in your life can tell you the truth, that's not leadership. That right there is isolation. So you want to be a strong leader? Strong leaders create room for honesty. They ask for perspective. They're not threatened by information. They actually use it. Okay. So you gotta ask, who can tell you the truth without fear? Hey Cassandra. Hey Nadi. Who can when was the last time you asked for direct feedback? Do people feel safe disagreeing around you? So if that lands, put a one into the chat. All right. It's taking a minute here. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Point six, we got two more points. 8 signs you may have a blind spot. Point number 6. See, people have become unusually agreeable around you, meaning that they're yes men. So you got to think about that. If you've got constant agreement around you, it may feel like but support, but sometimes what it is that constant agreement is evidence that honest conversation is no longer in the room. So if nobody challenges you, it may not mean you're always right. It just means the environment no longer feels safe for disagreement. Nobody wants to carry that emotional baggage. Because let's think about this. When you're having a conversation, you're bringing up a point. Agreement, when you get agreement, it feels good. Validation, you're validated by someone. You're hearing great idea. That feels good. But if you're getting that all the time, every single place, that should make you curious because there's no one that's right every single time. No one has the best idea every single time. If every meeting you have with someone ends with everyone agreeing with you, there may be something that's wrong. Because there are times when people will protect themselves because they're tired of arguing. They believe the decision's already made, and they may think that the question you're asking is just part of the process. You may say, "Hey, what does everyone think?" And everyone says, "Hey, whatever you think." That's not collaboration, because you may think that's collaboration, but that's really a group performance. And that has happened before. There are some leaders that actually train people to agree. Now, how do you do that? They wonder, how do you train people to agree? Well, you interrupt any type of opposing view. You challenge every suggestion. You reward people who support them. You become cold to people who disagree. That's how leaders can train people to agree with them. And if they follow that, eventually the room becomes quiet. And people mistake that quiet for peace. They mistake it for agreement. And really, hey, Dewey, that quiet can be withdrawal. It can be fear. Quiet can mean that people have stopped believing that their input even matters. Because, and this doesn't just happen in work. This happens in families, in friendships, in businesses, in ministries. One person becomes the dominant voice. Everyone else just learns to nod their head. And then the dominant person says, "Nobody ever told me." They may have tried. The question is whether the dominant person was available to hear it. So what can you do? Invite disagreement. Ask someone to challenge your idea. Ask what you may be overlooking. Ask what an opposing view would say. And when they answer it, don't treat that disagreement as disloyalty. See, some people can respect you and still question your decision. That doesn't mean they question your authority. Hey, Vince, that means they're just questioning your decision. So you need people to say, "I see it different. I think there's a risk. I don't believe that that's the next move." See, those are sentences that protect you. Hey, Prod. No. So the important thing is not to surround yourself with people who only applaud you. You need someone that's going to check the stage, to check the path before you walk off the edge. So you got to think about it like that. If you got people that are constantly agreeing with you, be curious, because that's a sign that you have a blind spot. All right. So that's point number 7. Let's go to point number 8. We are moving right along. Yes, we are. Point number 7. Excuse me. That was point 6. Point 7, 8 signs you may have a blind spot. Number 7, you keep fixing symptoms instead of discovering the pattern. I'm going to pause right there. Thank you for the rose. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And so blind spots that we have, they cause us to address each problem individually while missing the repeated pattern. So you can treat symptoms, but not treat the root. Let's break it down. So a symptom is one of the things you notice first. Someone has a cold, they notice a cough, stuffy nose, sore throat. Those are symptoms. The real thing, the real root of that, may be a cold, might be a fever. It may be any of those things there. So in regards to business, a missed deadline, that's a symptom. If you've got a conflict with someone, that's a symptom. If there's burnout, if there's constant confusion, those are symptoms as well. Lack of follow through. Every time if there's always these things that happen at the last minute, those are all symptoms. And many times we rush to fix the latest symptoms. We respond to the email, reschedule the meeting, we download another system, we find another routine, And the thing is, the immediate problem, that gets settled down. Done. That box is checked. Challenges, a few weeks later, something similar happens. So you treat the new incident, but the incident is indicative of the same pattern. If there's a recurring emergency that keeps happening, that may come from poor planning. If there's a conflict that keeps coming up on a regular basis, every couple of weeks during a meeting, that may come from unclear expectations. You haven't told them exactly what you need. Burnout may come from weak boundaries. If there's a communication issue, that may come from avoidance. Missed opportunities, those come from indecision. So anytime you're feeling these repeated things, those are symptoms. So you've got to stop asking yourself, how do I fix this situation? You got to ask yourself, what keeps producing situations like this? Right, exactly. So ask yourself, what happens before the problem appears? What decision was delayed? What conversation was avoided? What structure is missing? What's is there a warning that you're ignoring? See, fixing systems only creates temporary relief, but when you identify patterns, that creates lasting change. So sometimes we stay busy treating symptoms because the deeper pattern is, well, it's uncomfortable. See, symptoms, they allow you to focus on the circumstances, but if you focus on the pattern forces you to examine yourself. And that's harder. It really is. Self-examination is harder. It's harder, but it's more powerful. And because it's more powerful, it's a matter of not needing a temporary patch. It's just a deeper diagnosis. You're not placing, you're not putting a band-aid on the leak. You're not putting buckets where there's a leak. You're repairing the roof. You know, the, you've got to find the pattern. Once you find the pattern, you address the source, not the symptom, the source, the difference between the two. Once you address the source, you then start to change your behavior. You build a new structure. And that's how repeated patterns finally stop, by addressing the source instead of the symptom. Right? So ask yourself, what symptoms keep returning in your life? What pattern is producing? You got to ask yourself, what's the deeper question have you been avoiding? All right. And now number 8. Now, these first 7 signs are important that I just gave you, the signs that you may have a blind spot. The safe sign may be the most dangerous because what it does is it prevents us from examining any of the others. So, 8 signs you may have a blind spot. Point number 8. You're convinced you do not have blind spots. That's it. See, the belief that you have nothing left to see is often the clearest sign that you're missing something. And that's the danger. It's that certainty that can shut down growth. See, it's not about certainty, it's about humility. See, humility keeps you open to correction, to change. So this is the real. This is the bottom line of it. If you've missed all the previous spots, let's break this down. Point number 8. Everybody has blind spots. Period. I have them, you have them, leaders have them, coaches have them, entrepreneurs, executive has them, parents, experts, pastors, high performers. Everyone has blind spots. All right. So you've got to lock that in, let that register. Every single person has blind spots. All right. Just because you've done something for so long, it doesn't mean that eliminates blind spot. Experience doesn't eliminate it. Experience does not eliminate blind spots. Sometimes experience creates new ones. Now, there may be certain levels of success you achieve. The challenge is, though, is that some success can create overconfidence. Sometimes when you have repeated wins, that can make you stop questioning your approach. You start assuming that what worked before will always work again. Because you've had those wins, you're in that overconfidence area, you stop listening, you stop reflecting, you stop learning. You start believing that resistance is always someone else's problem. You start interpreting criticism as jealousy. Oh, that person is jealous of, the progress I've made, etc. They're doing that. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Ricky. They're jealous of that. You start interpreting questions as challenges to your authority. See, that mindset, that overconfidence, it begins to isolate you. The people around you become careful. Even the information that's reaching you becomes filtered. So the danger is not having blind spots. The danger is believing that you're beyond blind spots. That's the thing. So that's why I said you emphasize you want to always have humility. And when I talk about humility through certain lenses, it's some people view it as a weakness, and it's not. Humility is what it is. It's accurate self-awareness because it says, I know some things, I've achieved some things, I've learned some things, but there are still things that I cannot see. See, that mindset, being humble, it keeps you teachable. It keeps you coachable. And being humble, it protects your relationships, the relationships you have that are near and dear. Being humble, that humble mindset, it makes growth possible because it's not about doubting every decision, it's about remaining open. See, it's, and I want to make this clear. See, confidence and humility, they can exist together. You can trust yourself and still seek perspective. You can be decisive and still ask questions. It's so, the best leaders, they lead and listen. They have experience and they still learn. You know, and really it's about embracing that humility. It's about embracing that mindset. Because you can be successful and still need accountability. In fact, the more responsibility you carry, the more valuable outside perspective becomes. So you can't see, so it's not a matter of like, okay, I know the whole thing, but it's really embracing that humility, embracing that mindset. Like you can't see your own face without a mirror. You can't see every angle of your own behavior. That's why you need trusted people. You need coaches. You need accountability. You need that reflection. Why? Because the wisest person in the room is not always the one with the most answers. It's the one willing to ask, what am I missing? And when you ask that question, realize that that question saves time. It protects relationships. That question can also help you prevent poor decisions. So the bottom line is never become so certain of your own perspective that you become unavailable to the truth. All right. Does that make sense? Hey, Miss Tabitha. So let's do a recap of the 8 signs. So 8 signs you may have a blind spot. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for asking. Is one, you keep experiencing the same frustration. The second sign is your effort is increasing, but your results are not. The third sign is you're surprised by feedback. Just by feedback other people consider obvious. Great to see you too. Thank you. Number 4, you explain your behavior faster than you examine it. The fifth sign you may have a blind spot is you have stopped asking people what they honestly see. The sixth sign that you may have a blind spot is people have become unusually agreeable around you. Seventh sign that you may have a blind spot is you keep fixing symptoms instead of discovering the pattern, the source. And the eighth sign is you're convinced that you do not have blind spots. That's the number one there, is that out of the 8 signs you have a blind spot, you think you don't have a blind spot. See, I don't want this to be another conversation that sounds good, but doesn't change anything. You've got to choose one person you trust. This should be someone who knows you very well. It should be someone who respects you, someone who's not intimidated by you. All right? And ask that person one question. Ask them this: what's the one thing I may be doing that I do not fully see? Then listen. Remember, when you ask that question, don't argue, don't interrupt, don't explain, don't prepare a statement saying, I was doing this because, no, don't prepare a closing statement. You got to listen. Ask for an example. Thank them. Think about it. You don't have to agree immediately, but you do want to start to be curious. Because that one conversation may show you something you've been able to see from your current perspective. Now, today we talked about the signs that maybe indicate a blind spot. We stayed at the level of awareness. Now, inside the mastermind that I'm doing in just over an hour, we're going to go much deeper. The session I'm doing tonight is called the Executive Blind Spot Audit. we're examining various patterns that quietly derail high performers. Now, these are not obvious patterns. These are the kind of patterns that can hide beneath experience, beneath busyness, success, confidence. So, the purpose of this is not to criticize people. The purpose is really to help members identify three blind spots affecting their performance and decide which one to address first. Now, the mastermind, it's a private setting and it's practical work. And the members are not just identifying patterns, they're just choosing a specific behavior to change and building accountability around it. So, if you're interested in that, remember tonight's mastermind is free. There's no charge. You just have to register. Send me a private message and say that you want to know more about that, and I'll send you the link. All right. Now, one of the major themes that's in my second book is the growth. That growth requires us to walk through gates that we not naturally avoid. Sometimes that gate is truth. Sometimes that gate is discipline. Sometimes it's stillness. Growth doesn't begin when we prove we're perfect. It begins when we become honest enough to identify what needs attention. Now, if you like information about my second book, and send me a message. I will let you know how you can get a copy. You can go to my bio. There's a link right there. Now, sometimes and I'm missing a copy, but that's quite all right. Sometimes you know that something's not working, but you can't identify the pattern. Now, that's one of the reasons coaching is so valuable. See, a coach can ask questions you may not be asking. They can help you separate the symptom from the source. Now, if you're serious about your goals and would like to explore working with me privately, send me a message because we can set up a free coaching session. We can talk about where you are, where you want to go, and what may be getting in the way. Now, as I close tonight, because I'm getting ready for the mastermind, you got to think about that. Your biggest obstacle may not be the problem you already know about. It might be the pattern sitting just outside your field of vision. It might be a habit you normalize. It might be feedback you keep dismissing. It may be a symptom you keep treating without examining the source. So don't be embarrassed by blind spots. Everybody has them. Be concerned only when you become unwilling to look. This is when you need to have humility to ask, enough courage to listen. You've got to have enough discipline to change. So the question is not, do you have a blind spot? It's about, what am I currently unable to see? All right. So I'm going to get ready and go prepare for my mastermind. It's happening in an hour. As I said, if you're interested, send me a private message and I'll send you the link. If you're interested in a copy of my book, I will send you the link on how I will send me a private message. All right. I'll send you the link. But know this, that your next breakthrough, it may begin with the courage to see what your current perspective has been hiding. All right. So I want to thank you all so much. I'll see you in the mastermind and happening in just about an hour. All right. You all have an excellent time. And I look forward to hearing from you.